What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den. Doing something a little bit different on the channel today because I needed to bring in some backup. We'll be talking about Star Wars, new series on Disney Plus, going by the name Andor. You might remember it, you might not. He was in a little movie called Rogue One. I'm going to kick it over to my boy King Z and bringing him in. Videographer extraordinaire, long background in the craft. Tell us a little bit about yourself, boss.
How you doing? I'm King Z over here at Warrior King Productions. I've been working in the film industry for 4 years now, and I've worked on over 23 projects. I come from a military background, spent 21 years there, earned my retirement, and now I'm just trying to make some cool stuff for people to watch. I'm writer, director, grip, and camera operator, screenwriter. I've done it all. I've worked in every department except for wardrobe and hair and makeup for obvious reasons.
Ouch. Sick burn. I'm glad to have you doing it, and big shout out to you and thanks for helping out because there's no way I could have figured out how to get the boomer tech off the ground with this kind of thing. But I'm going to hit them with the synopsis real quick because I'd like to get everybody up to speed before we dig in. We'll come at it from a story side, coming in from a technical side. That's where you come in a little bit more, and we'll discuss what we think of the show. So we got Andor episode 1, titled Casa, with a runtime of 41 minutes and change. I adjusted that down to about 35 and change or so after I stripped the intro and credits, which again is a big ass problem on these Disney Plus series. They've had out the time way too far with the extra incidentals. It's like intro after intro and then credit after credit. But written by Tony Gilroy, and just before we throw down with the meat of the bones here, Gilroy wrote Rogue One, so it kind of makes sense that they brought him back. He's credited on, I think it was 12 episodes, so that's not bad. And it was it also mentioned that Lucas had a touch also, so maybe there was an executive producer aspect to him there. Initial thoughts, dude. What'd you think of Andor? Because I know they dropped three episodes on us up front, which was a lot for us to get to as busy guys in our prime of life. So we only do an episode 1 today for you guys. But King Z, what'd you think?
So initially, I went into the show with no expectations after how Disney's let us down recently over pretty much every IP that they purchased in the last decade. Since the end of Endgame, pretty much. Yeah. But I went in, loved the character from Rogue One, so I wanted to see what they were going to do with him, because we know where he ends up. Yeah. So there's really no threat to know if he's going to make it through the series or not, because we know he makes it to Rogue One. Yeah. But just to see the background and how they're going to tell this story was really good. I believe the first episode came in as a very slow burn to start doing character building, which I do enjoy in a episode 1. I see episode 1's pretty much as a prequel to a book, or not the prologue to the book. That's what I meant. That. Yep. So, and that's pretty much what we got. We got a little bit of who he is, a little bit of his dark side, and then what built him, what made Cassian Andor.
True. Now, did you end up watching more than the first? We're only going to do episode 1 today, but did you end up watching more than the first one so far, or no? Because I don't want to spoil things.
No, I only watched the first episode.
Okay. All right. I just want to, because there's a couple of, you get a couple of characters introduced in episode 1 that they definitely return to in 2 and 3, and they're not played up like major plot events, but I like to go into all these things completely blind and vanilla. That way I kind of get the full punch of what they're doing. So I won't blow up the spot for that stuff for you. My initial thoughts on this one are kind of the same as yours. I think I've got more than an advanced case of spousal abuse from Disney over like the last decade. The more I go back and I watch things like Endgame, I actually like them less and think that they kind of peaked with Infinity War. I think Endgame, when you take it on a step-by-step kind of story basis, there's a lot to be desired in that film. But I think what most people tend to remember is the Avengers Assemble moment at the end, and it makes it all worth it. It makes the 20-some-odd picture run worth it when you finally get to see them all lined up and doing their thing. So, but everything Star Wars after Rogue One has more or less been a disaster for me, besides Mandalorian, for the most part, Season 1. Season 2 was a little bit of a mess story-wise, but then they called in the cavalry for the end, and I think that kind of set everybody at ease for a little while. But then they did what they did in February to a certain actress on their roster, and they tanked all their goodwill. But as far as Andor goes, because I'm rambling a little bit already, because I'm just excited to talk about something that's actually fairly decent. I'll go as far as saying that. My initial impressions are about the same. it's a slow open, and I think what people need to remember is that good shows, if in genre, they don't have to open with a shootout. They don't have to open with a bomb going off. I think you're right. They're going for character work in this one, and they're really trying to drive home what kind of makes this guy tick, who he is, where he comes from, how he ends up going from, Aladdin street rat type character into rebellion freedom fighter that'll do anything for the cause. So we'll get into the scene by scene. I actually have it loaded up here on D Plus. I was just going to cut us through like major scene to major scene. We don't even have to bring that up on the screen just so I can keep us on track. But let me give you the synopsis right quick for everybody that hasn't seen it. It's Cassian Andor, played once more by Diego Luna of Rogue One fame, is pounding the mean streets and back alleys of Morlana 1, a company town with a couple of pleasure houses and other dens of ill repute. Is that the word? Who knows? Looking for the sister he lost in childhood. He runs afoul of sector security, a misunderstanding, of course, and Andor runs down a shrinking list of friends trying to wrap up his loose ends before he bails the planet. And then, interestingly enough, cut through the proceedings are a flashback to young Andor's life on Kenari, a planet I'm not too familiar with in the Star Wars lore, so I don't know if they made it up or not. And it's on Kenari before the Empire did Empire shit to it. And that's the episode in about 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to bring us up here, Zach, on the... get us over here to the first scene. So yeah, it opens on him. He's pounding the mean streets. He's running down leads on his sister. He gets into a casino / brothel / whatever the building is. He's trying to run down leads, but he bumps into a couple of dickweeds that try to hassle him and shake him down. They shake him down. Shit pops off in an alley. He ends up braining them both, and he's got to make his way out. What'd you think of the violence level in that first scene?
Well, the violence level, I don't think there was. What I saw in that first scene, all the way up until where he left, and the people were bullying him. I didn't think the violence level was too much, and the headbutt to the nose that killed the other guard, I thought that was a little weak there. But watching him know that he can't be traced, he has a past. So he had to execute the other guy so he wouldn't be identified. His remember, he was like, we could go in together and everything be out. He's like, I'll cover for you and stuff like that. And he's like, you just see working in his head that he couldn't go in. So quick execution and then flee the planet.
It's true that. One of the things I've come across online where people are kind of objecting to the tone right off the bat from that particular scene, in particular the execution, is people seem to forget how we met Andor in the first place. Like, this is a guy that blasted a pre-rebellion informant at the beginning of Rogue One because the guy was wounded and couldn't climb his way out of an alley when the stormtroopers were, demanding papers. So we knew this was a ruthless son of a bitch from jump. I think that it makes sense for a guy like this who the rebellion values as that kind of guerrilla tactician, no holds barred kind of guy. He's probably always been like this. So if he's coming up rough on the streets, he's a smuggler, he's a trader of whatever various illegal things he can get his hands on. It wouldn't surprise me that he bumps off a member of corporate security. So I'm not opposed to that in terms of tone here. Star Wars has had dark moments in the past, and like you said, he put one guy down with a headbutt, and the other guy you get a semi-off-screen blaster shot to the head execution style. It didn't bug me too much. I didn't mind it. Something else? Go.
You're saying we learn more about his character as, of course, the show goes on about his contact. You could definitely tell that was an ex-girlfriend that he went and saw.
Yep.
Possibly building to a love triangle because we find out that she does have a boyfriend at the time, but he is into getting illicit stuff to make a profit, and you just can't be found out when you're that type. Especially when you're trying to find someone you love, like your sister, which they hint at during the flashback scenes, of course.
We're going to get to those definitely, because I got something to say about that. Trust and believe.
Which we get pretty soon after the first scene. We get the first flashback scene establishing where he came from.
True. Let me lead us into that, because I don't want to skip too much ahead, because there are a couple of other intro things that come up as we go. We get a quick scene real quick that introduces the droid of the show, and I think the name was it B4 EMO or EMO B4 or something like that. Basically, this emo is in the name, and that's what everybody's going to call this droid. Real quick, I got a kick out of the droid. I know some people thought it played it too close on the nose for the yucks. He's broken down. He doesn't run right. His battery's busted. His memory's busted. Like random wild dogs pee on him in an alley. Like I thought that was kind of funny, and like there is a way to have those moments of levity in these kinds of shows, where unlike some of the garbage that we get in Kenobi and in Book of Boba Fett, if you give me one of these per episode and it doesn't come in the wake of a tragic scene happening, killing that moment, like I'm fine with these. They come up because it does lend it a sense of a little bit of lightheartedness. Do you have any thoughts on the droid at all?
Not really. I just saw the droid coming down the road. And I was like, all right. Now we do see that it's a less polished droid, unlike an R2D2 and a BB-8.
Yeah, emo is beat without a doubt. I have him up on the screen here. It says he's rolling down the street, like his head's basically at like a 30-degree slant or something like that. Like he's definitely been through it. So he gets peed on. We get the droid waking Andor up, and then we, like you said, we get the flashback here. So this is probably the part of the episode and of the series that I'm not going to like the most. I feel like the writers at Disney do this thing where they're obsessed with having dual timelines in their episode, and most of the time I'm like, you dickheads can't tell one story. Like, why on earth would you be trying to tell two separate storylines parallel to each other and then intercut in a way that doesn't make me sick to my mental stomach as you switch back and forth the timelines?
Yeah, but with the writer of this series, actually also credited as the show creator, so he's pretty much in charge. He's calling the shots for this show.
That's a good point.
He is the writer of stuff like Rogue One, which you saw a little bit of a parallel timeline with her, the main female character, and her dad.
True. Jyn Erso,
and then he's also written all the Bourne movies, which is a dual timeline done. So you might get a little bit better with this writer because it's more of his MO of how he tells a story.
He's actually credited with a couple of other big ones too. Coming to mind, Enemy of the State was on that list. Little political thriller that had Hackman and Will Smith back in the day. He had the Bourne trilogy. I mentioned a few other ones in my video. I think he did Armageddon, for what that's worth, because that's if you're a male of a certain age and you came up in the 90s, you probably get a soft spot for Armageddon at least a little bit with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck.
And you know which one didn't fit on that list? His very first writing credit, The Cutting Edge, a rom-com about a hockey player turned figure skater.
With DB Sweeney and was it Maura Kelly?
Yeah.
Now, dude, if we're doing total disclosure, I've seen that movie probably at least 60 times. It's actually coming up. I didn't mind it, and I had a massive crush on her. She's a bitchy brunette without a doubt. So yeah, I totally forgot he was on that. But that's a good point about he's got some previous experience with convoluted dual timelines, especially with the Bourne stuff. So maybe this will work out okay. So once we get into young Andor on Kenari, it's got a bit of like a what's it called? Like not Hunger Games, Lord of the Flies vibe. It's a tribe of what looks like all kids through like maybe late adolescence. They're living out in kind of like a jungle, temperate kind of forest and a village on the water. They have, if you look closely, some of the things they wear look like they're repurposed actual garments, and it's not just like animal skins that they hunted and did up into like like a poncho kind of like clothing, things like that. Like it's not quite Mad Max in how they look. Any thoughts from you on the Hunger Games Lord of Flies thing? Like, is this an interesting backstory for a Star Wars character to have?
I was thinking Smith, was it Smith Family Robinson or something like that?
Swiss Family Robinson. Yeah, classic.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe they were a stranded ship that landed there, and then they made the best of it.
True.
Type setting, but everyone has a beginning. You never really know what type of background anyone has, so I could go for it as long as it plays out properly. Like there's more that leads of that story. I think there's 3 total flashback scenes equivalent to about 5.5 to 6 minutes of the actual show.
Yep. Yeah.
So they didn't go too deep into that whole backstory because it was mostly set up like the rest of it was.
True. They're basically giving you adequate setup. I would say you're exactly right on that with the flashbacks. I think the key scene in the first flashback, I think, is one of the longest of the ones they have. But they show you the Republic frigate coming down. Like they show you the ship burning as it crash lands, and then throughout the episode, it's basically the kids, the older kids, and they're the leader. Then they're not named, and they speak in the native Canarian tongue with I don't remember. Do they have subtitles for that part, or is it just context?
No,
like
it
you
was
just kind of figure what they're going to do because then they go do it.
Yeah, because it was more they were showing you the action of. I mean, you could tell what they're doing without you actually hearing the dialogue.
Right. I don't remember if it was subtitled or not, but they're basically gearing up to go investigate the wreckage. Which I guess you're right. That is an interesting enough backstory, or half of a backstory, because we don't know if they're stranded yet, or if they're just displaced, or if they were orphaned and thrown out into the wild. You know what I mean, like Spartans in the 300s. So I like some of that ambiguity. It does kind of leave it up, and I kind of dig that.
And if we want to jump to the third flashback scene, it shows pretty much comes full circle of where it began, because when he goes to the brothel at the beginning, he's looking for his sister.
Oh, right, true.
And
he did not stop part of that.
And
little mission out.
And then at the end of the first flashback, he left her behind to guard. So that could be the spark that started this whole timeline of where he's at now.
I'll spoil it a little bit for you. When you get through I think it's the end of the third episode, they basically give you a little bit more about the Empire's activity on Canary, that like someone's coming to look for this ship. So that the hint there, that'd be that little sister is probably abducted or killed. Probably abducted. Like he obviously has reason to believe she's alive still.
Yeah.
So he probably doesn't suspect the worst at that point. But they switch from that scene. We have more with Andor and Emo Droid. They're basically hashing things out about where he's been. People are asking for him. It's clear in that scene here that he's trying to bail. He knows he's got to get out of Dodge, but he also wants to take care of a couple of people that are close to him on World. He doesn't want to leave them in a lurch. So he's basically putting down his cover story. This is where they introduce, we don't see her yet, but they introduce the character of, I think her name was Mava, Maava, the older lady. Is she get in this one, or is she in episode 2?
I think she's in episode 2, because I remember I think he went to his friend Brasso first to get their stories right.
Yep, you're right.
Classic friend, cover me.
Scene. Dude. So work me through that scene a little bit about what happens when Andor gets in there, because I thought them two together had a pretty good back and forth, and I feel like that'd be the kind of thing, like, if we lived nearby and I got into some shit, I'd go set you up with half a story like that, and you'd read the other half, and like we'd be on the same page for that. So what happens in the scene? Take it away.
So he quickly comes up to his friend and he's like, "Man, I crashed at your place. We had a couple drinks, and then I woke up." He's like, "No, because I was insulted by the way your drink choice that I might have had. So we actually did this, and then I went and found you, and it was like." So it was like them getting ready to see. The scene I could closely associate it with is the town, where he's like,
"Oh yeah,
I need your help. I can't tell you what it's about. You can't ask any questions." And the other guys, you just let them like, "Who's driving?
Who's driving?" Exactly. So I was feeling it between them two. I think that this is one of the other things that I think is missing, and we're not gonna bash sequel trilogy shit all the time through the series here, but this kind of scene is exactly what's wrong with Disney sequel trilogy. The trilogy wanted us to pretend that all of those characters were best friends and had been through it without actually having gone through anything on screen together by the time we all meet them and put them all in the same place. This show very intelligently has you at least have Andor go meet Brasso, do something logical, because he knows people are going to come asking Brasso about Andor because that's his guy. Yeah. So at least he's laying down that kind of foundation, and that's how you know a pro wrote the screenplay for this. This isn't so far a string of random events or like skits or scenes that they threw together, like action, dialogue. Like there's a flow to what they're doing, and I admire that so far. And that's the Brasso scene there. We're just moving it up. He sorts it out.
I believe next we get introduced to Bix.
Did I skip over Bix? Because I have I have fake Imperial guy next.
Oh, yes.
Let me hit this dipshit real quick, because I got a couple things, and you probably know what I'm going to say about this guy right here. Right? At first, I thought this was the show being token 2022 Hollywood, making the clean-cut, straight white dude look like a dickhead. Okay? And they they lay it on thick. Like these guys here, the character's name is Cyril, I believe. Right?
Yeah, Cyril Karn.
Thank you.
Karn.
Yeah. So they lay it on thick. This boy is basically like underachieving second in command of like mall security. He's got a custom uniform that the lead guy actually points out and be like, hey, did you mod your uniform? He's like, yeah, a little piping, little pockets, little tailor.
Yeah.
Right? So he lays it on thick, like he's standing at rigid attention. Meanwhile, the boss has his feet up on the desk, and you can tell the older guy's like, nah, dude, we're just gonna. All right. So the scene goes that they're discussing the murders in the alleyway of Corpo Security. And did you catch the name on these guys, by the way? I didn't catch it.
The two that were killed?
No. Like the group they work for. They're not Empire. There's something else.
Oh.
I just called them Corpo Security.
Oh, it's like MAPO corporate security.
I'm calling them Corpo Security.
Because that planet in that sector is actually ran by a corporation that pays ties pretty much to the Empire.
Yeah, they're Empire. So these guys are like discount Wish version Empire for all intents and purposes. And they behave like it, and their tactics when they get on the ground are laughably ineffective, but that's neither here nor there.
When you fail out of Imperial School, you go to us.
You end up here. Give us a call. So this dipshit here, and I call him a dipshit, but it's kind of unfair. He wants to investigate the two murders. He wants to lay down the law. He's taken it personal that a couple of his employees, ended up dead on the street. And his boss is like, no, I got a staff meeting in a couple minutes, and we're going to fake an incident report. We're going to smooth this over. We'll do a couple of other low-level actions to make it look like we're doing stuff. But we're not making any waves to make the Empire send their guys down here to do our jobs. Right?
Yeah.
What did you think of this scene in terms of the two characters and their outlooks on the murders in the alley?
So what I got from the chief, even though he's a very recognizable face with Rupert Vandart, he's been in tons of stuff. Famous English actor. Yeah. Actually, a majority of the actors are English because it was filmed in the UK.
Yeah, Pinewood, right?
Pinewood and just to get to this part, this show is the first one that didn't use the technology they pioneered in Mandalorian. They actually had big sets on location shoots for this one. And
maybe that's why it doesn't look like dog shit.
So they shot in the UK and they shot around the Pinewood, London area. They had a couple different locations, a couple refineries, and a couple like quarries that were, I always say that one wrong, but rock where they find rocks.
Quarries.
And
where is the question?
Yeah, and that's where they built. They shot on those locations.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of well-known British actors in this series that we'll see, as we saw in Rogue One, and to include the directors and the DPs, all have huge runs. Like the director of this one actually directed 7 episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh, true.
Yeah, Matt Smith, Doctor Who. So
okay, so good Who. Okay, I was gonna clear that up, but okay, yeah, I gotcha. True. So these two interacting about the case. Give me some thoughts on that. Was it interesting to see them not on the same page, or would you have liked to see a little bit more rank and file? Like how would that have worked in the real military?
So you would have a commander. You could definitely tell by Karn's demeanor that he needs to do good. His whole personality, his drive is to get that. He needs that attaboy. He needs that I'm in charge and people need to tell me I'm doing a good job, or he feels completely empty.
I gotcha.
And I think that's going to play bigger. He's going to overstep his bounds. He's going to try to. I see that he thinks he could definitely do a better job than his boss. His boss is like, I've been there, done that. I need to move on. I'm only here to collect a paycheck, or in the famous words of Marshawn Lynch, I'm only here so I don't get fined.
Yeah, true that. I like how they close this scene out too, where like the boss is saying, "I'm gonna head out to this meeting. Don't put your feet on my desk while I'm gone." It's like you're dead on balls accurate, right on that. It's like you got a guy that's basically middle manager, but he knows he's got a good gig.
Yeah,
like it seems like he's fat and happy. The other guy's fat and happy. So he's got a good gig, so he's not trying to jeopardize that for anything. But I think you're gonna see as you watch the next couple episodes, another mini spoiler. Events do pop off, and Karn becomes different. it's noticeable, and that's why I'm not willing to write the show off as like the writing crew taking more pokes at white guys as characters being buffoons and whatnot. I think here he's the character, the actor's not, the character in his own mind is overextending himself, like you said, into being a buffoon because he thinks it's what he needs to do to climb the ladder. But there's a reason for it, and it gets put in a pretty solid, significant check down the line. So there's a natural evolution to his personality, and it's not just them taking the piss out of the role. So it's not too bad. You'll see when you get there.
And as we were saying, like in the Mandalorian first season, I see the level of acting so much higher than it's been in the past in some of these other series, unlike the first season of Mandalorian. First season Mandalorian was, and of course we know it was all done by John Favreau, who's, saved so many different franchises. Elf, he kicked off the Marvel Universe.
Iron Man, oh yeah.
And now he's saved Star Wars from ambibuted. I can't speak, but he saved Star Wars. So I see the level of acting, and they definitely put their time in the casting and the purpose of getting the people who could fulfill these roles to the maximum of their potential. Even the small role of the lady in the prostitution house, like how she took her role very seriously of who she was.
Good point. Really good point. That character actually comes back for a fairly significant story progression point. I think it's in episode 2, I think. But just to touch on that for a quick second, I think you're 1,000% right. I think the Disney shows that don't do well really do seem like they think they can get away with doing whatever they want based on name recognition. But when you see the results of those shows versus the results of some of the other ones that are a little bit more successful, and I think at the end of the day, Andor will be successful enough that it'll keep its greenlit season 2, and we'll probably get a third, unless it just falls off the deep end. But we have actors here that actually command the screen when they're here. I'm not too familiar with Diego Luna. He might have been in other stuff, he might not have been. But when he's on the screen, I know he's the guy. Like, I know he's supposed to be the focal point of my attention. And it's like you said with the two guys in security. I didn't necessarily know the older guy was a renowned British actor, but when he was there, he was in charge of the scene. Like, there was no questioning he was the ranking officer in any of those shots. Like, I got that. He might have been kind of a chubby middle-aged type, but those guys are those guys. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not unrealistic to see these guys. This isn't a superhero show where everybody's supposed to be jacked and fit and all that kind of shit.
And that's the thing with a lot of these is that they play on the nostalgia of people like you and me who grew up with the original trilogy of Star Wars. They play on the people who read Marvel comics, like who read the golden age of comics, 80s through 90s comics. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to modernize it, of course, because they're trying to also appeal to a new audience who didn't grow up with these characters as their childhood. The problem is that they're trying to do it in a way that takes away what made them great in the first place.
Yeah, true that. And that's always come down to excellent writing and character work. Even if you got to suspend disbelief for a couple of plot holes, the larger story that they throw down always made sense at the end. And I think that's the thing that also is kind of lacking in recent Disney, particularly with Book of Boba Fett. Not so much with Kenobi. That was just a dumb show. But there was just messes of plotting issues all over the set. So not to get too sidetracked by those guys.
Yeah, when it comes to Kenobi, I think they were just looking for a reason to have Edward McGregor on a show. They wanted to bring him back. And like, what can we do with him and try to make up what Ben Kenobi did on Tatooine the whole time while Luke was growing up and Leia was becoming a princess.
That show was a minefield waiting to happen unless it literally was about him leaving Tatooine to go do something elsewhere that had nothing to do with the Skywalker family. But that's a separate video for another day, without a doubt, because we could go way down the rabbit hole on how they screwed that up. I mean, I got the Kenobi novel right over there on my ottoman that I picked up after the show was done. And it's a novel that came out before the show. It's not a novelization of the show. And I'm interested to see that, like, you jackasses have like a 400-page novel that you could have lifted, like at least the main plot line for the book, and you didn't do it.
And you see that running through Hollywood, Rings of Power, the Wheel of Time series. You have a base material, and you're not sticking to it because you believe you can write a better story.
I'm going to master the craft.
Yeah, and if you're going to jump into an IP with a huge fan base, such as the Lord of the Rings, such as Wheel of Time, such as Star Wars, you need to stay true to the source material. If you want to write your own story, write your own story. Don't use a existing IP to tell your story. Tell your story.
Otherwise, it's just fanfic, bro. And you and I could throw out fanfic for you. Like we could put every IP made in like a randomizer and churn out a 30-pager as a treatment anyway for anything. My Little Pony, Batman, Captain Planet. Like I'm just rambling.
Yeah.
There's ways you can just go with the established IPs and write in a genre if you respect it and if you understand it. But let me get back to the scenes here so we don't go too crazy over time on Sunday here. So the next scene, we meet Bix now. So we meet ambiguously hot female star, because I'm pretty sure she's hot, but like typical things Disney and Star Wars and current age, everybody's kind of dressed down, but she's pretty good looking. I'll vouch for Andor's taste in Bix. But she's running a trader shop, it looks like, or a garage or a mechanics bay or something like that. It's obvious these two have a history. They don't really get into how deep that history might have gone, but my read was they hinted on some stuff.
Yeah, they definitely hit on stuff, and then they brought in the boyfriend. You'd see him like watching from like the shadows of them two interacting, so you could definitely tell he's not comfortable with Andor around, which also hints to more of their past as well. Then they start talking about the smuggling, of course, or selling of stolen goods. And what he actually has is a navigational unit for Star Destroyer. I forgot the actual nomenclature of the actual device, but that's what it breaks down
Navicore,
to.
I think they call it.
Yeah.
Like Navicore, something like that. But it's a high ticket item, and what comes up when he's trying to basically solicit Bix to call in her contact, who trades in like the high value pieces of borrowed items. She doesn't want to do it because she thinks it's too big of a risk to even do. But he basically pleads the case that he needs this so he can get out of Dodge, having been involved in what he's been involved in. So she's the connection, basically.
Yeah, like a common person who has a fencer, you don't bring him just one thing. You have to kind of bunch it together to make it worth the time of the fencer to be exposed during the time that he's out there. And that's what they were playing into. Even though he has one item, he really needs the money. So that's what the whole fight was.
Yep, true. So that was Bix. And again, just like we were talking pre-show, I don't hear a whole lot of people backlashing about an actor, actress, whatever, that isn't white having a role in Star Wars. I thought she was great through 3 episodes. She gives a really human performance when a tragedy strikes in episode 3. I didn't hate her. I don't see the racist backlash there, and I'd like to point that out. I think when you have a character that's well written, well executed, and well portrayed, literally nobody gives a shit. It's okay. We've always been okay with that.
If race becomes a major factor of your character, then your story is going to be lacking.
Guaranteed, 100%. And I challenge anybody within genre fiction to comment below an example where swapping out a key demographic point, or not even a key demographic point, but a demographic point of a character actually improved things for the better. I'll be interested to see that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why when I'm writing a character for a screenplay, I usually don't put race in there. I try to build it based on the character so anyone can play it. I don't really care who comes in and plays it, unless I have a particular actor in mind. Like we were writing a short story, and I was limited to the actors I had, so I had to write the character for that person. That's the only time as a writer I should do that. The rest of the time, it should be focused on story, and any actress, actor can be plugged into that role and play that role. Race doesn't play a factor unless it's historic, like a certain area. But we're in alien worlds. Why does it really matter what race a person is? As long as they portray the role properly, I don't care.
Good point. So when we move the timeline forward here, we move the timeline forward into a flashback. My bad. So we get the second flashback. It goes really quickly. It's basically Andor looking up to who I think is the leader of the group. It's a young lady who's probably one of the older teens. He does the thing where he takes the ash or the grease, whatever it is, and he marks his face, and she has it marked while they're gearing up to go run down the crash ship that they saw a little bit earlier. Did you pick anything else up there, or is it pretty straightforward?
It's pretty straightforward. It goes back to Native American war tribe when the warriors were getting prepared to go for a hunt or a battle against another tribe. It's just a play off of that, which is well done. Like you see you have the warrior cast there getting their paint on to go to this battle or whatever the scouting mission it could be.
It's scouting at this point, right? They don't know. They don't know what it is. You actually got a better look at that in episode 2, like when they actually get there and get inside the ship. They're kind of dumbfounded, which kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier a little bit at the beginning, like where we think maybe they were stranded. I don't think they were stranded now that I think about it, but you'll see why when you get there.
Okay. The other thing is that you can see that Andor was on the outside looking in.
Yeah. And somebody tries to stop him, right?
Yeah, tried to stop him. And then like he got the nod from pretty much what I would take as the war chief or the tribal chief and that female character.
Yep.
That it's okay for him to join us. Maybe he just reached the proper age or something like that to join the type of war party.
Let me ask you this: we're through 2 flashback sequences now. Do you like that they're speaking in a native tongue without subtitles, or are they doing a good enough job of letting you know in context and action what's going on in those scenes, or do you need it spelled out for you on the screen with the subtitles?
I'm completely happy with it, them speaking in a native tongue, and then we just following the action and figuring it out for ourselves. Too many times we play that our audience is stupid, and you really shouldn't. Let the audience have some fun with it. Let them think about what the words actually mean. And
yeah, I'd agree with you on that, because I think that, like, who hasn't watched, any amount of fiction growing up over the last couple of decades and wouldn't realize what a group of people basically picking up, like, bow staffs and stone axes and putting on war paint, like, what that wouldn't mean. And that if one person tries to prevent somebody from taking the paint, what that would mean. Or if somebody that was too little tried to pick up a stone axe and somebody took it from him and put it down, and then the little kid went skulking away, that what that scene would mean. I mean, sometimes you don't have to be dead on the nose with the subtitles or the writing, as long as the direction's good. I think that they're nailing the flashbacks, like you said, to your point, that the direction of what they're actually telling actors to do on screen to convey what's being said in the native tongue that they haven't spelled out has been really effective so far. I'm digging it.
Yeah.
I'm definitely digging it. All right, I'm going to move us forward here. So this is where we see the next scene is Karn at one of the Corpo security bases. They're running through like camera feeds, or for lack of a better word, or sensor readings, to see Andor's ship taking off. I think that's what they're reading, because he's asking the technician to run down the lead.
Yep. What you got there is you have a sensor scrub, and they picked up something that shouldn't have been there.
Right.
And now he's asking, he's like, because he's not following the orders of the chief security guy.
Right.
He's taking this on himself.
Yep.
And he wants to prove, I think this is the whole thing about him trying to prove that he is right for the job. He needs that attaboy that I found the murderer of these 2 guys. And you can see that portrayed, like other people are kind of on the same wavelength as their commanders. Like, what? He's like, don't you care about the murder of 2 security guys? But yeah, they were just, they found a scrub, they found a ship, which would probably be the initial thread that starts leading to a bigger pull that will lead the antagonist, which you can definitely tell he's leading towards the antagonist to the protagonist.
True. What I took away from this scene here was a little bit more just of the of his, not necessarily his plot line, but his personality building, even beyond the need to prove himself for the job. There are a couple of instances as he's dealing with the underlings within Corpo security, where they're basically asking him, like, this gentleman here in particular is like, oh, there's got to be like 1 million readings. This is going to take all night. And basically Karn's like, well, what the fuck else do we have to do around here except our job? Mm-hmm. And he basically tells him to get on it and get it done. So he's 100% down for the cause of upgrading his position within mall security, without a doubt.
Yeah.
100%. Bump us up here. So we're hitting on what I didn't like about the episode, and I feel like the show didn't need this scene. He meets up with somebody in the alley, and I missed the character's name on the timeline. It was the black dude that brought in the giant alien with him. Andor basically owes this dude money, and dude brought along a little bit of muscle to get him paid up. Did you catch his name?
I did not, But
I thought it was Nori, but then I think that was the Rings of Power chick. So I think I'm getting it wrong. But it doesn't matter. I don't think they come back. But we know Andor is kind of like, are they trying to make him into too much of Han Solo here, where like he's owing money to somebody? Or did you take anything away from this part?
I don't see that he owed him money. It looks like this guy went on a deal or an investment that's gone south, and that's what he's trying to recoup. Is that
he's definitely trying to recoup something?
Yeah. But the guy, what I took from is that this guy is trying to be bigger than he is, which he's going to become that thorn in his side. Going back to the Wheel of Time, if you read the Wheel of Time, you did take a Padon Thane type character to this, who he's the one who brought the bad guys at the beginning of the first book to the Three Rivers area. That's who this guy is. He's the one that they're, or if you watch the really bad rendition of Ready Player One, he's I forgot his name, but he was the character that pretty much set everything up for the bad guy to succeed against Wade Watts. I Rock. That's his name. I Rock.
Oh God, like you don't. But anyway, I don't see. At first, I thought they were going for like a to your point. I thought they were trying to give this guy like the big time feel, but Andor punks him like straight out, and he's like, "Nah, I'm gonna do you a favor and not mention this little conversation to anybody." And then like dude's hired muscle just kind of like pisses off anyway, without them even trying to like shake Andor down. And probably for the better, because the last two dudes that tried to shake this guy down, one took a blaster bolt to the face, and the other one's nose is somewhere coming out the back of his, the back of his skull.
The headbutt from hell.
The headbutt from hell. Right? Like I feel like this scene didn't do anything except maybe paint an even more. Like this dude's really out of time. Like has no allies on world. He's burned all his bridges. So maybe it's got a place in there. But I felt like I don't know. I didn't take dude seriously in the shakedown attempt, and for some reason, even though he brought like an 8-foot tall, enforcer with him, like he just looked like a big dope. Like there wasn't anything intimidating about him. I would have brought the and I don't know all the species in Star Wars, but they had one in Mando season 1, like the red-skinned devil-looking dude that was played by, was it Clancy Brown?
Yeah,
it was in an early episode of Mando. I don't know what that race is in Star Wars. They should have brought somebody like that. Like somebody that's got a little bit of yoked up, a little bit of like funky skin color with like horns or fangs or something. Because like I don't know, the dude he brought here could have. I wish we should have grabbed an image of him. We'll do that for next time. Looks like he just could have just been carrying heavy bags.
And that was I think part of the point of the scene is that the guy he hired, you could tell that this guy is a lowling. Who's trying to shake down Andor, and the guy he hired, he straight up said, "You just paid me to stand here." Yeah.
Yep. Dude, true. All right, so not a whole lot, not a lot of lore building going on in this scene here, but it takes up a couple of minutes out of the already short runtime. And just to touch on runtimes real quick, it's been a common thread in some of the other solo videos that I've done on the Winterwolf's Den channel. I feel like these guys here, when they do shows, they don't value time enough. And that if they know they're not going like a full hour, like an actual cable show, like Game of Thrones, or something that would have been on like network TV back in the day, like Law and Order, you've got to hit that 45 and change minute mark, and then like everything after that is credits and commercials. Like they list their runtime here as 42 and change, right? But when you cut out all the bullshit, because there's like 3 title intros, a recap, the credits and everything else, like they lose like 7 minutes on average from what I've tracked through She-Hulk, through Miss Marvel, through even WandaVision at the beginning. Like the runtimes just go lower and lower and lower and lower, but they still feel obligated to cram in a B story, a C story, flashbacks. Does that take away from pacing for you at all? Or do you not mind them? Do you think they're doing okay time-wise?
Well, see, that's why I do prefer series over movies at times, is because you have that longer time of period to tell a story. Like this one is even going to be more episodes than their normal. Like I think their latest run's been like 8 episodes of a series, like with Hawkeye, She-Hulk, and whatever else they have.
Yeah, She-Hulk's going 9, I think. Right, you're right though. That's about the average, or less with the Star Wars stuff. Because Kenobi and Boba Fett only went a half dozen.
Yeah. So
that went a half dozen by stealing 2 episodes from Mando season 3.
Yeah. So you can definitely tell that they're going to try to spread it out a lot. So when you look at old TV shows, what they shot for was 44 minutes. If it was an hour-long drama, or it was 44 minutes of content, and then you have 16 minutes for ad time, because you got to get paid. The network's got to get paid for the two.
Gotta keep the lights on, bro.
Yeah, and that's the thing with these streaming services, is that they're trying to rush out stuff so quickly to make content to get people on.
Yep.
That's why it's really usually bad, is because they refer to it as content. Before, it was referred to as a network television show, or this is a series. Now it's, we got to get this content out. That's the reason why it's bad, because you're referring to it as content and not what it actually is. This one, I think they're trying to take it to a new level. They're trying to get from what I can tell so far, they're trying to get a theatrical TV series done, which that's what I thought these streaming services would bring. When you have 10 episodes that tell a story that most people try to shove into an hour and 40-minute movie. And that's what I believe the creator of this show is actually trying to do, is make a theatrical series. And that's the reason why you can have a slow burn like this first one. Throw in these little bits and pieces here and there, long as he writes in the payoff later in the series.
That's an important point. I think that's another thing that comes up a lot in some of the shorter series that we get out here is, and I've noticed that, I know you're not watching Rings of Power, but God bless you. They've run into this problem on shows like that where they skip to the payoff, they play the dramatic music, and they have like the lens flare with the sunrise and all those kind of shots. And I'm just sitting there like, you guys have no idea why that shit worked in like the Two Towers, with like Gandalf bringing the Rohirrim over the mountain with the sunrise and the Howard Shore music going in the background. You don't know why that worked. It worked because for 2 fucking hours we were told we had to hold the line until like the 5th day or whatever.
Yeah.
And the payoff comes because it was set up properly. That scene doesn't work if you're just like, oh, and then this thing happened. Like, no, they don't. Who cares? Like, it could have been a fleet of like stealth bombers, and I'd have been like, all right, same shit.
And that's a thing with a lot of these, and they're trying to play into the modern day attention span. We're in the age of TikTok, shorts,
but I don't want to talk
reels.
over you, but I don't know. See, I think that's not giving people enough credit. I think there are enough people out there that hate that shit so much.
Yeah, and they're in our age bracket.
And but we're the ones paying the streaming subscription bills, my brother.
Yeah,
we're the ones with the disposable income, and that's what they forgot. These dickheads have forgot that I'm the guy that has the disposable cash on hand to pick up an Xbox Series X and a gaming laptop, or bring my kid to Comic-Con and show him off cosplay and merch, and go buy 30, 40, 50 back issues of, like you said, classic X-Men, in their print runs. I'm the guy that creates the new fan. You dickheads making a streaming series that basically shits on guys like me and King Z over here, and shits on our taste and original trilogy. Dude, we're not the Twitterati. Those dickheads don't spend money on your shit. They need to figure that out like yesterday.
But they still shoot for the golden demographic. It goes back to old network TV as well. The golden demographic, 18 to 35. Not us 40-year-olds.
See, I think the game is changing. We're still under 45. We got a few clicks left. But those demographics, not much longer, I know. Those demos only work when 18 to 35 are guys and girls that are coming out of high school, getting into college or trades, getting in and out of the military, and are making livable wages where they can dump money on, premium, well, not premium, but like extras in their lives, like having multiple subscription services and stuff like that. I bet if we get a ratio, if we could dig up some numbers sometime, I guarantee the number of people that hold Disney Plus subscribers are, the 2.4 nuclear family types, and it's not single female lawyers living in the big city. You know what I mean? Like, they're gravitating to Peacock and HBO Max. So companies like Star Wars, they should figure some shit out. But not to get too far the sidetrack than we just did on our little socio-political satire, which is fine. Next scene here, after we're working with Andor almost getting shaken down, but not. We follow Bix. She's basically going, I think she's heading back to work. She has a little chatteroo with the guys that are going to put her in contact with the smuggler who is as yet unseen, unnamed.
Yep, and you can definitely tell she's trying to do it sneak. She has like a hidden place. She has, like you have the code word guy who tells you you're clear to go. She goes into the rack, goes up the tower to where there's a communications device.
See, that's slick, and that's what I was hoping this show gave us, was some of that on the. See, if they do this whole thing like a spy show, like James Bond, Star Wars, but like gritty James Bond, where like spies got to keep in touch with networks using dead drops and hidden comm centers and stuff like that. Dude, there's a place for all of that in Star Wars, and some of the better novels have some of those things thrown into it. When they get into dealing with the what's the massive criminal syndicate in Star Wars? I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It's I think the Empire, not Empire of the Sun. It's basically Prince Shizor is the leader of that. They made an N64 game out of that a million years ago. But there's organized crime here with the Hutts and other groups, so it makes sense that there would be spy networks and double agents and things like that. So I'm with you. I think this is cool.
The other part that they are trying to hit on is what and how the rebellion was actually born, because you have an empire, you build a rebellion, but like when we came in episode 4, the rebellion was already going strong. Like they already had big ships, they had fighters, they had
fleets, they had soldiers, they had pilots, they had bases, dude.
This show
had bases when that happened.
Yeah, this show takes place 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, which is, if you don't know, that's episode 4 where they destroy the first Death Star. Okay. So this happens 5 years before that. So you're seeing the birth of the rebellion and how people in a rebellion, like you could take into the American Revolution into this, of how they communicated with allies between themselves and how they set up stealing the cannons in New York during when the British were coming, how they besieged Boston and made the soldiers go home during winter, stuff like that. And you're seeing a little bit of that underlying, like the reason why the Americans won this the war was Washington's espionage circle. It wasn't his battle prowess, because if you look at Washington, if you look at Washington's war record, he was 3-6. Yeah. He had a losing record, but the 3 were big. The 3 he won were big, but it was his spy network that undermined everything the British was trying to do to hold the colonies. Now you're seeing this rewritten for a sci-fi type thing of you're seeing how the spy network, the underground, is built, and they probably use smugglers. They used the underground and stuff like that. You just see it in some of the fantasy books, like they try to shut down a besiegement, but who they befriend in these when they do a siege on it? It's all the underground people, because they know how to get food into a city without being noticed.
Game of Thrones does that. The Night of Onions with Davos down there in King's Landing, smuggling onions in and things like that. When King's Landing was under siege during, I think it was the Mad King's final days. So yeah, you're exactly right. That's how they work. Dude, you want to take 3 here and grab a drink or something right quick? I don't know if we want to do that live.
I've been drinking during the whole show anyway. So.
Dude, I didn't even notice. All right, dude, we're gonna keep that in there. Then I'm just gonna have my not at all sponsored by Pepsi. Don't drink too much of this at home. And I don't mind. I didn't notice it. I didn't notice on the tiny screen if you were doing that or not. We'll just cut out all that. Cut out all that bullshit. But the next scene up, we're back on Karn. He looks like he's at the mall security office here. He kind of gets his stride into the room. People are working. No one's playing Tetris on any of the computers or anything like that. But they basically have a quick chat about him trying to run down a lead on the murder suspect. And I think here's where he finally snaps a little bit, when he's not being taken serious by a couple of the lesser techs or junior officers, whatever. And he's basically like, it's 2 of our own people that were murdered, damn it. And da-da-da-da, and we're going to find him and this and that. So what did you think of him escalating to the point of getting loud?
It just shows more of just his tenacity. That this is about him. It's not about actually finding murderers. It's about him. Now, he's trying to get everyone to fall in line with what he wants to do, but it has nothing to do with actually finding the murderers. As you did hear back in the original conversation with Chief Haynes, is these guys? He was surprised that these guys weren't murdered years ago.
Years ago, yeah, I remember he said that. He said Kravis in particular, like, oh, I know that guy, most miserable person I've ever met, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I like this scene a lot. I think that him escalating to the point of getting loud in front of subordinates made me enjoy the general noobishness of him talking to Haynes at the beginning, because we see just how far he's pumping his own tires here. Because when it really pops off for him, there's a pivotal closeout moment in episode 3, and I hope we get to that real quick, because I really want to get your idea on that. We see he's confronted with his own bravado at least twice in that sequence. And it happens in 2 very meaningful ways that kind of, I think, set him on a path that might be a little different than the one he's on now. I'll leave you with that so don't spoil too much. Next up in the show, we're back on Andor. Andor's in the shipyard / junkyard that he's been borrowing ships for all his searches. It looks like he's swapping out memory boards so he can eliminate paper trails and things like that. And here we got another character introduced real quick. The guy's name's Pegla, I believe. And he's basically like the number 2 in charge of the yard who's been letting Andor borrow the ships. But we see here that Andor has burned down another bridge, even though he returned the ship, returned it fueled, swapped out the memory chip. But basically we're shown and told that the heat's rising too high, and his list of allies is definitely shrinking at this point because Pegla doesn't want him. He wants him gone. Like Andor says, I was going to ask you if I could borrow it tomorrow. And he's like, nope, you got to go, homie. Like, we're all done here.
Mm-hmm.
Anything point out here? I thought this was pretty straightforward. Just kind of showing him the frog being in the pot, getting a little boiled, a little hotter. Like the temperature's rising on, the heat's on.
And what this is doing is showing that his way of his old life is burning out, and it's about time for the rebirth into his new life, which I believe, I haven't seen it yet, but from my prediction is that by the end of episode 2, you'll have that moment where he's going to be pushed to meet someone who's going to start moving forward. Third episode will be him trying to fight himself if going path A or stay on path A or actually deviate to path B. And as he goes, he'll find himself going more and more towards B, I think with the help and when they bring in the Forrest Whitaker character from Road One. It's trying to put him on that.
Right.
Yeah. So when he comes into the series, we'll be pushing him down the Road One series. That's the other reason why I was really excited to see that it already got renewed for a second season, is because you can really space out this story a little bit longer. These 5 years before, or actually, Road One takes place 2 years or a year and a half before the Battle of Yavin. So it's pretty much a 4-year span where you get to really see what Andor did for the rebellion once he starts going down path B.
That timeline's really interesting too, because I've been told, and you might have seen this in the show research, there's going to be a Game of Thrones House of the Dragon style time jump between season 1 and 2. I don't know if you heard that or not, and I heard it's significant. Like it might be 5 years.
Well, it could be 5 years. He's dead in 5 years.
Yeah, then maybe if those rumors don't add up, then so that's something to put a pin in later, because maybe I've got the timeline wrong. But anyways, we'll look back into that. Then you're right. That's a good point. I have a problem with the pre-end of season 1 green lighting of season 2 thing. It's actually a 2-part. I think that a lot of times the announcement of something being greenlit for a season 2 is a tactic by the show running squad to make you think that something is better. It's a marketing move, that something's better than it is. We've seen this before. Batwoman in particular got greenlit for like multiple seasons down the line. They were talking about doing. They're almost like LeBron James titles in Miami, not 1, not 2. Like it's that whole thing with me in these seasons. It's kind of like, I'd rather you not tell me you've got more coming until you deliver a product that makes me want to see what's coming next. I'll leave it at that and hope for the best with that with Andor.
Mine is because of how long it took them to shoot them. This took longer than a normal series. It took 10 months to film this season 1. And I think the showrunner was like, I need more time to tell this story right.
That was probably pandemic related too, because they started shooting on this. Was it December before the pandemic? Was
November,
it like December 19?
It was November 2020. They started creating it in 2019. Yeah. They started shooting in November of 2020 with the pandemic restrictions of both the UK and the US during the time. And they finished wrapping 10 months later in September of 2021.
You know what? That makes me like the show a couple points more now, having heard that, because when we look at these shows, you got 2 separate sets that I'm referring to in specific with this concept right here. When we have the Island of Misfit Children scenes, you got 10, 15, 20 kids in those scenes. And every shot that every time they're on location, I think the planet's name is Morlana 1 or Morlana 2 or whatever. Basically where Andor is with corporate security breathing down his neck, or where he's at. When they're in town, there's multiple extras walking through the streets. When those guys are going into work in the morning and taking their gloves off the wall and shit, there's 30 dudes in that shop in a tight formation. And the whole thing looks lived in. It's dusty where it's supposed to be dusty. The insides of the houses they live in look like houses. There's decorations. They feel lived in, but they're clean without being sterile. And I feel like everywhere we've been with Star Wars and these shows, it feels like you said, I think that they maybe got a little too enamored with the tech that they dreamt up with for the Mandalorian so they wouldn't have to shoot on set. And I think they leaned way too fucking hard on it. Because none of that looks real, especially in I'd probably say Kenobi's probably worse for that than the Fett. But here, this feels like a village. They shot on location or on a set because everything looks like I could walk through it and touch a wall and know it's not styrofoam.
Yeah, and that's probably what really slowed down the production for 10 months. Is a normal run for 10 episodes, like their show like OBS, which I worked on. Yeah. It was a 3-month shoot. Pretty much you shot an episode every week and a half.
I feel like that's, and you know what? I prefer that. I think I'm done with living in CGI world for everything that could come up in these shows. I think there's places and opportunities to apply that kind of technology. But if we kick it back to shows that are slightly older, I'm thinking Battlestar Galactica, the re-release that came through. It was like 2004, 2005-ish. Like it basically revitalized that franchise for a stretch. And having Katie Sackhoff on your show will 100% do that. Everything inside the ships that they're on is metal, looks rusted in places where it's supposed to be rusted. But crew quarters have blankets, wall hangings, pictures on the walls, crap like that. But when they bring in, the ship-to-ship combat, it's obviously CGI, but it works. And I feel like new Star Wars thinks that if you just push the needle all the way into the red for the CGI and the video effect stuff, that now you don't have to tell me a story at all. That I'm just here solely for the spectacle.
Yeah. And
I hate that.
That was the thing for the person who was set design and set design and art director. That's the two roles. He actually was the same one who was on Rogue One.
Oh, so that makes sense.
He pulled a lot of the same stuff in from Rogue One.
That makes sense. In healthcare, we call that continuity of care. You bring in professionals and they stick with the case, from start to finish. That way, you don't drop the ball on some things, or one doctor or specialist doesn't drop out and has to rely on, case notes that you left me to pick up what the plan was for whatever's going on. So I think we got go ahead, bud.
And you talked about continuity. That's the one thing I am going to be looking forward to when we get to episode 4 and 5, because they actually have 3 different directors that are going to be directing all these episodes.
I didn't know that.
It's the same director for the first 3, and then he comes back at the end. Now, this is very common for shows that run multiple episodes. They'll have the primary guy, like when I was on OBS, the primary guy shot the first 3 episodes. Then they brought in the second director, so why he could go through the footage of the 3 episodes, get the rough cut done, and see if they need to shoot anything extra while they still have the locations to fit episode 1, 2, and 3. So he does that. So they bring in another director to keep the show running, who they do their own thing. You did see a little difference in the way directors operate. All directors are different. They bring in their own people a lot of time. Like they bring in their first assistant director who runs the set, and they also some of them bring in their own DP, which they do have a different director of photography. They have 2 that work through the whole series in this one.
But they're still taking their cues from the guy that wrote the first 3 in most cases. That way things stay tonally.
And they also have 4 writers for this. They brought in 4 different writers. The main guy, Tony Gilroy, his brother Dan Gilroy writes a couple episodes, and then they have one of the other ones come in and writes like 1 or 2 episodes.
See, but you got to figure that even if they have a handful of people like that these guys and gals are in a writer's room together as the show as it's being drawn up and scripted. I mean, not on an ongoing basis. That way they can continue to follow through on plot threads and setups and payoffs. And again, we're looking at you, Disney Star Wars trilogy, sequel trilogy. That was a mouthful. You can't put these dudes in rooms 6 years apart and be like, all right, Kingsley, you go ahead and give me a first movie, and I'll write the meat in the middle of this, but I'll change everything you did, and then we'll have you and a couple of other people come in at the end. We'll fire you for episode 9, and then we'll bring in even more people to do episode 9 and be like, no, it's good. Don't complain. You just don't like Finn because he's black. No, bro, it's because your movie sucks. It's because it was awful.
You didn't write him well.
Right. And you didn't give the guy that showed up with an episode 9 script that made sense. What's his face that does the Jurassic World? So it's like Colin Trevorrow.
Yeah.
Like you should have just kept the dude. I mean, maybe it would have sucked, maybe it wouldn't, but at least it would have been something in line with, a well plotted thing that possessed some continuity. But we got sidetracked on that. We only got one scene left. Let's bang this one out, bro. Let's get this done. So we get the final flashback of the sequence, and it's a short one. It's basically Cassian is waving goodbye to little sister, who we don't get her name, do we? As an aside, she's never named because they don't use words.
Yeah.
And I didn't pick up anything in speech where he puts his hand on her shoulder and it sounds like a name.
And even when he was looking for her at the beginning, it was like the girl from such and such. Yeah, I'm looking for my sister.
That's right. When he was at the brothel. That's right. So he's gearing up with the rest of the scouting party. They're going to check out the down ship. There's not a whole lot going on in here. They basically he walks away. She tries to follow him for a quick second. I think he just kind of waves her off. And then they cut the credits. And because it's Disney and Lucasfilms and Star Wars, there is no post-credit action that I recall. I'm just checking the timeline here.
Yeah, they usually don't. They usually don't do that for the TV shows, except for like the last episode or second to last episode that sets something up. And I've only seen it in Marvel.
Or not. Yeah. It might be a Marvel thing on the D+ stuff. So, anything to take away? I thought this was a basic one here with the other run through.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty straightforward of a prologue of a story or a chapter 1 of a epic. Where you're just getting introduced to everything. You're seeing they're setting up the main character, a couple side characters. You're just setting up the situation and the locations, which they set up 3 total ones in this movie. You have where Andor lives, you have Corporal Planet, and then you have Jungle. So,
true. High point, low point. Favorites, not favorites? Anything specific jump out, or not enough yet because it's a slow burn?
Thing I like is, well, I've already mentioned it once, was the actors who took this seriously, the portrayal of these characters. They really came out and they portrayed these characters instead of just taking that Disney paycheck and move on. Some people do that. I'm looking at you, old Harrison Ford, in most of your movies now. Mm-hmm. You're just cashing in on your name.
Yep.
But
can't wait till Indy 5 comes out. We're going to destroy that.
I think
low point.
Low point. Really didn't have one. Like I watched it actually last night. It's been a really busy week for me this week, so I actually watched it last night. So I didn't really have a low point as it's. I was just looking at what it was building.
True. I think for me, I agree with that sentiment on the low point. I didn't see anything that made me groan. You should see me when I'm putting together show notes for like She-Hulk and stuff like that. Like I can't write fast enough. I gotta basically pause every 10 seconds to like slam write something in a notepad or on the laptop or something about every next sentence she says because it's so fucking annoying that everything that comes out of the mouth. But I don't really have anything on this show here yet. Now there is a character that's coming through in later on, I think, when the Empire gets involved. And that actress has gone kind of out of her way to lay in a little bit about what her motivations are. And it does kind of reference, at a very surface level, men being incompetent or, inept, and I'm going to fix it and change it and yada, yada. But I think some of those remarks might have been taken out of context. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that. Takeaway from the show for me, though, it kind of ties into what you said about the actors and their performances. I'll go a global level, one notch above that, I think. I appreciate that it looks like there was effort and thought and planning just put into the actual execution of whatever story that they're trying to give us, period. That nothing here feels like it's fake or that it's wasted. I mean, besides maybe that one little scene in the alley where they did the fake shakedown, but that also kind of developed Andor's character a little bit, being, I can't be pushed around by your punk ass. I mean, there's something to take out of that.
It also establishes the underground, a little deeper underground that's on that. Like there are other people that are in his line of work there. He's not acting alone. He is part of a possible organization.
That's a good point. And just in terms of like overall production value, like I was saying, things I enjoyed. I liked Emo Droid. His paint's chipped and rusted. He's kind of battered. I like that. the ship that Andor is using to do his drive arounds and check out, see where his sister is. It looks like it's been through space, like it's kind of battered a little bit. It's not sleek and shiny like Mercury, looking like the old ships from Episode 1. Phantom Menace, like the Naboo starfighter, basically looks like made out of liquid chrome, and that ship was supposed to, you know what I mean? But here we're on Junkyard Planet, or Junkyard Base or whatever. That's what it should look like. And again, not to beat the show, but like if you remember on Boba Fett, when the Skittle Squad shows up on their stupid moped scooter things, and they're basically fresh out of the package, right off the lot, neon colors, chrome not ding. But like, dude, you live in Tatooine. Like, no, I live in one of like the most affluent states in the country, and our roads suck. And if you don't take care of like your car during the winter, they get beat. You know, like, no Skittle Squad. Hashtag no Skittle Squad. It's the worst. But everything here feels like it's exactly what I would figure if I was driving through, if I was driving through the Dust Bowl in the States and I took a big rig from, New York and ended up somewhere like San Diego. Like, you're going to see some road damage and wear and chips and dings and all kinds of that. And I feel like this show has that. It doesn't feel like plastic.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
No, that's definitely a good take on what they were trying to build with the production design and the background. You also see it in the background artist. You just see them, like, they look worn down, like they're coming from work. Like the big scene where he meets his friend Brasso for the first time.
Oh yeah.
You see them come from work and you see that they're tired. They've been working in looks like it's a mining town, so like a Pittsburgh type place.
They show you a little bit more about that in episode 2. They're actually it's kind of a salvage yard where they're basically stripping old like hulls of ships that have crashed or that have been brought in. But it's blue collar. Pittsburgh's a great example of that. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, very blue collar type town. And they portray that, because if you drive through cities like Pittsburgh, Detroit, you can see that it's not a polished city. You have a couple polished buildings maybe, but if you go to the house, you see that the houses they need care, because you know what? I'm working 18 hours. Yeah. I don't have time for house care.
That's exactly what those guys and girls. I didn't notice any specific females in that scene, but the dudes rolling out with the gloves, they definitely look like they were putting in that blue collar, like, knuckles are scraped when you get out of work kind of gig. I know we talked about ratings earlier in the week, and I didn't come up with a good scale yet. I apologize. So, for the sake of episode 1, in context of episode 1 only, and not about predictions or anything else, in terms of an hour of your life that you spent watching this show, out of 5.
Out of 5,
the best. Yeah.
I'd give it a 3.8.
Ooh, all right. That's a little higher than I thought either of us would actually go. I didn't realize we were going to be using partial decimals like that, so I'm only wired to go, wholes and halves. I was going to give it a solid 3.5, so pretty close to what you gave it. I feel like I was hearing some things online where people were taking points away from their ratings, and it made sense to me. Where the show specifically ends here on the flashback sequence of what he's heading out to do, I feel like that kind of miffed me a little bit. I'd have rather have seen Andor present day going to do his next thing and not just getting shut down by a guy in the shipyard telling him he can't have the ship anymore. Like, it should have ended on a larger crisis than that. I don't know. Maybe that's as big as they could go for the first episode, but I felt like ending it on the flashback just kind of annoyed me. Ding a 0.5 point for the clowns in the alley. The more I think about it, even though I get what it did, I'm kind of like, I mean, maybe if he shot one of them in the foot or whatever to make his point, that would have been a little bit more badass. But I guess I can't hate it on that. Any final words? What
I did like was a lot of the camera work. The colorist, which I didn't get a chance to look up his name, the colorist did a fantastic job of making it look cold and distant. It was a much darker tone. You did definitely see the blue, so it's not as warm. You did even see that in the mining town, like with Karn when he's up there. It's a very cold, not warm type color set. It's very dark, showing like, this is the part the Empire doesn't care about. Yeah. These are the people that are beneath them. This isn't even, they're not even on their radar unless you make them on your radar. Which
Right, their
sometimes that's a
security
good
is
place to
basically
be.
mall cops. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the best place to be in their world. You know what we should do? We should pull up a map sometime of like the Star Wars expanded galaxy so we can see exactly where some of these shitholes are. Because I'm betting Morlana or wherever. I don't know, Morlana's where he went to the brothel.
Yep.
What's the name of this? What's the planet's name they're on? Because I remember they brought up a planet name. Is it Fenrix or Fendrix or something like that?
Yeah, and I think that's where he ended up with, or is that the name of the
That's
ship?
what, no, I thought that was the name of the planet. We have to look up the name of where Bix is, basically. Like, where is he trying to flee from?
Yeah.
Because he went to Morlana, checked the whorehouse, and then bailed and came back to somewhere.
Yeah.
I just can't remember the name of the back to somewhere. But and it's funny, too, because as I was watching it the first time, I actually said out loud, I know they showed the name on screen because they gave you the timeline, they gave you the 5 BBY. And I was like, oh, look at them orienting me to where things are and what time it is. Like, thank God. Because throughout the runs of these other garbage shows that they've had, it's like ships just end up places. And then they're too stupid to name them in dialogue. So I'm like, okay, so that was Blue Forest Planet, or this was Castle Planet, or whatever, whatever the hell's going on. And I hate that.
Yeah, you did definitely tell that the showrunner on this is definitely taking more care and more distinction in the series. Like they actually care about the Star Wars universe and what people take of it, or they just care about the product that they're putting out, their names on it. So it's a lot different when your name's on it.
Yeah. True that. All right, that's all I got on this one, Guy. Any closing words? Anywhere we need to be followed online on your side of things, my friend?
Right now, I'm kind of in flux. I do have a website, warriorteamproductions.com. It hasn't been updated in a while. Things have just been crazy since pretty much August of last year. So hopefully things will be getting better here soon. I will be on the road for the next couple of these. I am going, I deliver packages right now for a living. So I'm going to be traveling with a certain package delivering company and delivering in different cities. So we'll see where I'll be next time. I'll let you know.
Nice. And as for me, of course, we'll be watching the video on all the series videos going forward on Winter Wolf's Den on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Winter Wolf's Den. Not too crazy active there because Twitter really does come across like a cesspool, but we are also considering Facebook and Instagram pages. So if you all are more interested in seeing any of our coverage in those locations, let us know. But I think that wraps us up on this one. So we'll see you guys in the next one. Until the next hunt.